It certainly could be a diplomatic courtesy. It could also just be that the U.S. is mulling over its options. The administration continued to mull over its options, not quite sure what the next step is now that Iran has put forward a new proposal. But yes, all eyes will be on Washington. The king will be speaking before a joint session of Congress today. We have been
Right.
hearing that he's going to be using language of reconciliation. And I think it's, the U.S. and UK will be having deep conversations, UK
Right.
looking to reset those relationships.
Okay, so we have a special relationships, plural, I think. How alone is President Trump? How alone is America in this war?
Yeah, Tom. I mean, this is the big question. The U.S. and Israel obviously went into this war in close collaboration, but it was always a U.S. on its own approach. That has been, as I've written before about this, Trump has always said that he is not looking to build a coalition of the willing. It's a coalition of one. And the U.S. went into the war that way. They're likely going to have to end the war that way. We know Europe has had many conversations over the last couple of weeks about how they can help support after the conflict, but there have been no hands raised from across Europe or even the region to get actively involved in this conflict. This is a conflict owned by the U.S. and this administration.
So if it's owned by this administration and the U.S., is it the incentive? Is it the incumbent upon the U.S. to initiate meaningful negotiations here?
Yeah, I mean, we know the latest, Paul, is that Iran has put forward through mediators in Pakistan a new proposal, a new offer. And that offer seeks to separate out the issue of the future of the Strait of Hormuz from the nuclear question. I'm thinking about it as the question of to delink or not delink. The U.S. has said that the nuclear question is the only question in town. The Strait of Hormuz is a sort of uncomfortable, very costly, very impactful side effect of this conflict. But the U.S. never went into the war even obviously thinking about the Strait of Hormuz. That's in fact why we're in this situation. So the U.S. administration will be looking not to delink these two questions. That doesn't mean that we're not going to see some progress because this war is costly. The U.S. has sent over more military personnel and kit even as we speak, over this past weekend. But the U.S. is hesitant to escalate this conflict militarily even further. So they will be, as Tom said, they're going to be using this moment with the king there to mull over and think about this latest proposal. Catherine Leavitt has said Trump will respond soon, but I don't think that anybody's rushing towards the next step in negotiations.
Is there a realistic, option or off-ramp for the nuclear question with Iran? It seems like they have quite a bit of leverage here, and there's no real need to deal on that aspect of it. How do you think they're going to proceed?
Well, Iran certainly will have learned from this conflict that if it had had a nuclear weapon before the conflict, it would have been much less likely that the U.S. would have pursued these objectives. And so it becomes at this point very hard to see how, as you said, that they're going to be willing to have any sort of flexibility on the nuclear issue. That being said, there are some sort of gestural points that Iran could offer up as part of a more straight-only deal, including further monitoring of its nuclear capabilities by international monitors. It could offer up some sort of brief pause in nuclear enrichment promises, but we're not going to see them. They have shown time and time again that they're not willing to take nuclear enrichment off the table or even offer up what Trump calls the nuclear dust.
Lindsay, an irresponsible question, but I think it has to be asked almost in harm's way. If we initiate a new military thrust, do you suggest we will go after the leadership of the various sets of leaders of Iran?
That has always been more of the remit for Israel and Israeli forces. So it could be the case that the U.S. enables Israel to sort of pursue another thrust. But the U.S., there's been a delegation of responsibilities here where Israel has been going after the personnel and the U.S. has been going after the capabilities, the naval, the military, the drone capabilities. So I wouldn't expect that really to be the case. There's a big open question about who even sits atop the Iranian regime right now. Of course, there's a new Ayatollah, but who speaks for the regime? There's various voices that, Secretary of State Marco Rubio said it's not even clear who speaks for the regime and if the latest proposal actually is reflective of what the regime thinks. I would expect it to be I really expect that any further military thrust will be very sort of cautious and conservative, but it is possible because we know that this administration likes to pursue all these different tactics,
Right.
military, economic, and diplomatic at the same time.